Hey everyone, how are you doing today? Good to see you all. Just thought I'd hop on for a little conversation. Um, yeah, it's the afternoon. It's actually the evening. It's dark outside here pretty early, so afternoon and evening kind of run together because it gets dark around 4 o'clock now. Um, but yeah, miserable weather today in New York City. Just absolutely miserable. Raining all day. Rain, dark sky, all day long. I will say it's not that cold though, and it's about to be December. Tomorrow is December, and it's not that cold. So I'll take it. I'll take the not cold part in exchange for the dismal, rainy stuff going on. But yeah, folks, I'm glad you're joining me. I'm glad I could just hop on here. I just wanted to get on here for a few minutes before I head on the train and head on home. Thought that might be a fun thing to do. Don't want to go too late tonight. Don't want to go too late. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell because I don't always announce that I'm going to do these lives very long before I do it. Like tonight, there was like 20 minutes. Anti-communists. All right, very good super chat question. Definitely will jump on top of that. Intellectually lazy. Very good. But yes, folks, I don't always announce that I'm going to do the lives a long time beforehand. Sometimes my schedule is up in the air, and I make a point of exercising every day. Just went to the gym. Gyms are still open here in New York, so I was able to get on that elliptical machine. That was good. I was able to lift some weights and then, go back into the gym. Now, the other thing is you can't shower at the gym. So you can't shower at the gym, but you can go to the gym and exercise. So I went to the gym, I exercised, walked back to my office. Here I am. I'm in the conference room, so I'm not wearing a mask. And I was able to just hop on here, So be sure to hit the notifications bell. So the next time that I decide to hop on here, that you know about it and you can join the fun, right? Because it's more fun the more people that are here, right? Nick's already asked his question about anti-communists being lazy. Intellectually, I'm going to answer that question as soon as we're done with the opening remarks, which aren't going to be too much tonight, and then after the roll call, and then I'm going to just start answering your questions, right? Because it's about you guys. Ultimately, we're a community. We are a community. We're a fun community. We love each other. I'm trying not to get caught up in the bitterness. Now, I don't know if people have been noticing on my Twitter page, but these ignoramuses of both the left and the right occupy way too much of my time. I need to detoxify and not spend so much time arguing with idiots to my left and idiots to my right, right? PragerU, right? I love to pick on PragerU because they will put the dumbest things on their Twitter page. They will tweet out dumb videos that say all kinds of dumb things. And so I love to dump on PragerU. And it just annoys me to see them say things that are so easily refuted and don't get refuted. Today, PragerU was arguing there's no racism in America because African immigrants do financially well. Well, I pointed out that immigrants to the United States from Africa generally come here with a lot of financial resources. That's why they do well. Duh. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, you don't get a visa to the United States from Africa if you don't already have significant resources, if you're not connected with American companies and businesses. Come on, right? But nobody says that. They just point at them and say racist, so I have to step in and say what's actually going on. I love to just take PragerU to task, right? PragerU, they were on there saying that nuclear power is good, which I agree with. And then they were saying that, what was their argument? They said that Chernobyl was caused by communist bureaucracy. And then I pointed out that China has a huge amount of nuclear power plants and no accidents. The French nuclear power industry is very, very safe, and it was started by a card-carrying member of the Communist Party. In Iran, the peaceful nuclear energy program is run by the state. So this notion that, government bureaucracy caused Chernobyl, that's ridiculous, but nuclear power is good. Nuclear power is good. I believe that. And I believe one of the main reasons that Israel cannot stand Iran. And let me just talk about this, right? We saw that, there's been more attacks against the Islamic Republic of Iran. I'll tell you, Israel, and this isn't like an immediate cause of the conflict that's going on, right? The main thing is that Iran is an anti-imperialist state. Iran has broken free from Western capitalism. Iran is a supporter of the Palestinians and a supporter of people around the region fighting for their freedom in places like Yemen and Bahrain and Lebanon and elsewhere. That's the main reason this is happening. But but there's another issue, which is that that nuclear power spells the end of the oil-based global order. I mean, it's well documented that opposition to nuclear power comes from big oil, right? And it has for many, many generations. You can document this. And the reason is that nuclear power, and most especially nuclear fusion, points the way to a world without big oil dominating the planet, right? And that's why Israel in particular hates nuclear power. Now, back in the 1980s, Saddam Hussein, the Ba'ath Socialist government of Iraq, was building nuclear energy, and Israel attacked an Iraqi nuclear power plant, killed a number of people. But one of the people they killed was a French citizen, because Israel was cooperating with, Iraq was cooperating with France to build that nuclear facility. A little known fact, right, that Israel does not like nuclear power because nuclear power spells the road to the Middle East not being important any longer. The Middle East is vitally important because we have an oil-based global order. And the Middle East is vitally important because it's got loads of oil. Number one, it's not as important as it once was, you'll remember, because of fracking and et cetera. But the Middle East is still very, very, very important because of all the oil. And on top of that, oil markets are dominated by the 4 super major oil companies in the United States: Shell Oil, Chevron, BP, and ExxonMobil. And if you combine France's total with them, that's like 85% of the world's oil production. So as long as the world sticks to oil, Wall Street and London stay on top. And Israel is an outpost of Western power. It's a settler state set up in the Middle East as an outpost of Western power to function in that region to secure the rule of Western corporations, right? And you'll remember after World War II, Israel became very, very essential to the United States because all throughout the region, in Egypt, you had Abdel Nasser building Arab socialism. Eventually, you had the Ba'athist movement in Iraq and in Syria. You had Libya that was breaking free, and because countries in the Middle East were breaking free, and Israel opposed them and was aligned with the West against them, you remember the 1967 war, Israel became very, very important to Western capitalism, right? And if the world breaks out of oil, Israel stops being important to Western capitalism, right? So, obviously this isn't the direct cause of the situation, of why Israel's flipping out about Iran's nuclear power and such. That's not the direct reason, but it's part of it. It's a very, very, very big part of it, that if humanity gets out of the trap of fossil fuels, Israel, I don't know who that is, Hunter. I don't know who George is. I don't know who that George is. That if humanity gets out of the trap of fossil fuels, Israel stops being relevant to the global power structure. Big corporations based in the West. Israel's entire reason for existence is helping Wall Street and London secure oil profits. Without oil in that region, there'd be no Balfour Declaration, right? There would definitely not be, the Nakba, right, and the creation of Israel in 1948. So that's why Israel hates nuclear energy and nuclear power. Israel's got nuclear weapons, right? Everybody knows Israel has nuclear weapons, right? They're the only country in that region to have nuclear weapons. The only country in that entire region to have nuclear weapons, but somehow they're the victim, right? And Israel is the victim, right? It's always under attack. It's always the victim of everything. It's got a huge cache of nukes, and none of the countries in that region have nuclear weapons, but somehow Israel is just the victim all the time. It's kind of amazing. But yeah, that's the Middle East there. So anyway, back to PragerU. So, PragerU, right? I jump in and point out, what I need to point out. And PragerU is always coming out with some dumb right-wing statement. So I love to just respond to PragerU because I know that liberals won't respond to PragerU in the way that it needs to be responded to. But then there's these clowns to the left, these Vaushite, I don't know what you want to call them, these bread tubers, and they're obnoxious as well, right? Right? It is a well-documented fact that the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency sponsored and subsidized modern art. That is a fact. And if you want to look for a source on this, look for the CIA's website. Go to cia.gov. They have a whole article about the Congress for Cultural Freedom program, an entire article describing how they funded modern art, right? Along with the Rockefeller Foundations and the Ford Foundation, they subsidized modern art because they wanted to undermine socialist realism. They wanted to undermine social realism, which was the less explicitly communist, but, that's the Grapes of Wrath, that's Diego Rivera's murals, that's all social realism. But socialist realism is the art in the Soviet Union, Sergei Eisenstein, right? The music of Shostakovich. They wanted to get rid of all of that kind of art and replace it with this art that leaves you with a feeling of ambiguity. Makes you feel like there is no truth, there is no future, there is no right and wrong. Right? That was what the CIA was all about doing. They realized that in order to defeat the communists, that the best way to defeat a truth that you don't want to acknowledge is not to pump up your own truth, because when people realize that truth is false, they'll go to the other truth. The best way to defeat a truth that you don't like is to announce that there is no truth. And that's what the CIA did. And I've written about this, and my Kamala Harris book talks about it. I'm working on an entire book on this subject, right? And you can read about this, about MK Ultra, what they did with drugs. This is all public record now. All public record. It's a fact. It is a fact that in order to weaken communism as part of a cultural Cold War operation, they call it the cultural Cold War, it is a fact that the CIA subsidized, modern art that didn't have clear shapes, that was ambiguous. I mean, do you think that average people just wanted to see that? Do you really think that average people were just like, you know what, I'm tired of paintings that look like something. We're just going to vote with our dollars in the free market. Give me a break. Give me a break. In modern art, who's to say it's bad, right? I mean, there's some good modern art there. I mean, Jackson Pollock's paintings, I don't particularly care for them, but who's to say it's bad? I've been to the New York Museum of Modern Art. It's a nice museum. There's modern art that's fun. Andy Warhol, the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. I went there a couple times when I was growing up, and it was a favorite. Pittsburgh wasn't too far. I mean, it was a few-hour drive from where I lived, and I think twice, on 2 occasions as a child, I went to the Warhol Museum, and that's a modern art museum, and it's not, the message here isn't that modern art is sin, that's not the message. Greeting from your comrades in Vermont. Any recs for folks sick of struggling under U.S. tyranny of this government? How do we break free? How do we fight? Any recommendations? So, Vermont, how to break free. All right. Yeah, so, the point is not to condemn it as a genre. It's simply to point out that it had ideological value. That's the point, right? That is the point. But, even though this is true, the memo has been sent out among these, whatever you want to call them, among these, I don't know, left book losers, I don't know what you want to call them, that if you point out that the CIA funded modern art, you are a Nazi. So if you point out what the CIA itself has admitted, that they funded modern art to counter social realism, if you point that out, that's anti-Semitic. Why is that anti-Semitic? Why is that Nazi? The platypus analysis of the death of the left. Okay, we'll talk about platypus. Why? Why is that anti-Semitic? It has nothing to do with Jews, right? There are plenty of modern artists who are not Jewish. There are plenty of modern artists who are. There are plenty of classical artists that are Jewish. There are plenty of classical artists that are not. Has nothing to do with Jews. Has nothing to do with Nazis, right? Give me a break. Give me a break, right? It has nothing to do with Jews. Has nothing to do with Nazis. But they have decided that if you don't like modern art, if you dare point out that it was funded by the CIA, you're a Nazi. Basically, if you believe in genuine Marxism, if you still understand concepts like overproduction and underconsumption, if you believe that there's actual truth in the world and right and wrong, if you believe that history is marching forward, you're a Nazi, according to these people, right? The only thing you're allowed to be is what they are, right? And if you're not what they are, right? If you're not that, you are by definition a Nazi. This isn't insanity, right? It's insanity, but it makes sense from a certain perspective. Yeah, it makes sense from a certain perspective, right? It really does. There is a huge amount of class privilege that comes with all of this, right? This is not, these are not people whose parents work in factories. These are not people whose parents are truck drivers. These are not people who have struggled to get by. These are not people whose mom is a home health aide. This is the people that are in these bread tube communities, the voices that think everyone is anti-Semitic and call everyone a Nazi because they say that there's right and wrong and there's truth in the world. These are not working class voices. This is suburban, right? This is the suburbs. See, I grew up in a very, very small town in Ohio, post-leftism. I grew up in a very, very small town in Ohio. And actually, my little town, I believe the slogan of my town was a city of diversified industry. Right, in my little town, the main employer was Smucker's. Smucker's Jelly was based in my town. There was also there was a Smith dairy plant where people processed dairy products. There was a company called Flow Torque. I don't know what they made. They made auto parts or parts of parts that made auto parts or something. There was an air conditioning manufacturing company. And it was a working class town, and those folks were very, very conservative, very right-wing folks, very, very conservative. My family were the only Democrats we knew, but it was a working class town, right? But I went to college. I went to a small liberal arts college near Cleveland, and a number of the people that I went to college with, they were from places like Hudson, Ohio, right? They were from places like Sandusky, Ohio. They were from places like Lakewood and Beechwood, Ohio. These are there's that ring of suburbs around Cleveland. And I noticed that even though a lot of them were Republicans, a lot of them were conservative, but they had a very different growing up experience than I had. A lot of them had read Howard Zinn, had been required to read Howard Zinn in school. I could not imagine being required to read Howard Zinn in school. It never would have happened. Do you believe censorship or any degree of state repression in China will fade in 10 to 20 years? China censorship will fade, question mark. We would never have read Howard Zinn. We never would have read Howard Zinn. In fact, we were constantly getting a lot of right-wing indoctrination. I remember military recruiters were brought in as experts into our AP government class when I was a senior. They brought in a military recruiter to be an expert on U.S. military history and also try to convince us all to join the military. I remember every Thanksgiving a minister, a Protestant minister, would come in and preach a sermon to my elementary school, right? We were required to sit there and listen to a sermon and a prayer, even though it was a public school. I remember, I was in elementary school during the impeachment of Bill Clinton, and we had these things called character education, where once a month the school guidance counselor would come in to talk to us about being more moral and such, and give us moral guidance. And almost always there was the Bible and Scripture was involved in it, and almost always Bill Clinton was the example of what a bad person was. And it was just, I got very, very right-wing ideas growing up, very, very conservative ideas, a lot of widespread opposition to gay marriage and abortion in my town, and this was a working class town, right? It was working class people, right? A lot of them were members of a labor union, Smuckers, that was Teamsters Union, right? A lot of them were labor union members, but, they were labor aristocracy, right? They were white working class people that were in the, and there were some families of color. It wasn't entirely white, but it was mostly white. That's where I grew up, a little town, right? And it was a working class atmosphere, it was a working class atmosphere. Very conservative. A lot of folks in the military. A number of kids who went to school with me went to the military. When I graduated, they had a special thing at graduation for the young people who went into the military. There was kind of a special thing. And a number of my classmates went into the U.S. Marine Corps, U.S. Army. There was this weird thing that people thought that if you went to the Navy, you were gay. I never understood this, right? That's ridiculous. But there was this whole don't go to the Navy. The Navy is for gay people. It was so, people can be really, really backward in these small towns. It was a working class atmosphere. But these people that were from the suburbs, right? These suburban folks, their parents were lawyers and doctors, right? And those folks have a very, very different worldview. Their teachers are reading them Howard Zinn in school. There's a lot more emphasis on anti-Marxist communism. There's a lot more emphasis on competition, right? Competition in showing how much money you have. There's a lot more shaming of people who don't have as much money as other people. There's a lot more, everyone wanting to dress like they're rich. What are the Macy's conferences? Cybernetics about controlling Macy's conferences. There's a lot more of that, like you're poor, you're not as rich as I am stuff going on. It was a different atmosphere, different values, and I just think about that, and that this bred to milieu, these people who are just so triggered by, when it really gets down to it, the reason that they're anti-authoritarian Marxists, they wouldn't be Marxists. These people wouldn't be interested in Marxism. Marxism is economics, it's dictatorship of the proletariat, it's class struggle. They don't give a flying F about that. They don't care about that. What they don't like is that Donald Trump has built a movement of working class people, right? Now, it's centered around reactionary ideas, anti-immigrant bigotry, nationalism, anti-communism, but Donald Trump has built a movement of working class people. Donald Trump projects strength, right? He projects strength. And there's a lot of these spoiled middle-class kids who are just scared of Donald Trump, right? It scares them. It just makes them afraid. Oh my God, big, mean, scary guy. They don't want a strong leader to come in and fix the economy and fight for the people. Oh my God, that's triggering. They don't want the economy, the government to make the economy get better. Oh my God, my freedom is, these are middle-class kids who've been pampered, right? They've never been harshly disciplined. The military is not a big part of their lives. They just, they have this childlike anti-authoritarian bent to them. That when someone comes in and projects strength, like they're actually going to improve things, they're going to make dramatic action, it makes them scared. It makes them afraid, right? They're like, oh my God, it's like, their mommy taking their PlayStation away from them or something, And it's this adolescent, juvenile temper tantrum against authority. And they are terrified of Donald Trump. And they're terrified of, inferior working class people from working class towns like myself, getting political, because everyone knows we're a bunch of scary authoritarians. And so it's like Donald Trump is always denouncing Marxism. Marxism is of the left, so they're like, okay, I guess we have to become Marxist, but they're going to become anarcho-Marxist because no authority, right? They can't have a government that actually has any strengths and gets things done. That's an interesting question. CCF, Broadway. And it's this middle class, childish tantrum about authority. That's really what it is. And to them, Donald Trump and Maduro, Donald Trump and, Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump and Xi Jinping are all the same because they're big, scary leaders who have a powerful government that does stuff. Oh my God, I just want to play with my PlayStation. It's this very, very juvenile, childish anti-authoritarianism. That's really what it is. It's really what it is. And it's, that, oh my God, someone's going to come into their life and take away their freedom to just play video games all day, and it's going to force them to grow up, and get a real job, and this is a rich kid, adolescent, permanent childhood, fixation for these people. It has absolutely nothing to do with Marx and Engels, socialism, utopian, and scientific. It is nothing to do with that. It's rooted in this childlike desire to never have any authority figure in their lives, and they're triggered by Donald Trump because a lot of working class people are suffering, and they want someone to take charge and fix things. Donald Trump is trying to take charge and fix things and do it in a very bad way, and he's made things worse, right? So I'm not for Trump, but I'm telling you what Trump represents is what these people are against. They're not against Trump, right? These people support Israel. They say I'm anti-Semitic if I criticize Israel. So they love Israel, and so does Trump. Trump's moved the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem, so they have no problem with that, right? They have no problem. They said I was anti-Semitic just for pointing out that Jacobin is funded by a pro-Israeli NGO. So they don't have a problem with Trump being pro-Israel. Trump hates communism, right? He hates North Korea. He hates China. He hates Venezuela. They hate North Korea. They hate China. They hate Venezuela. So they don't disagree with Trump on that, right? They just don't like what Trump represents when it really gets down to it. They agree with Trump's worldview, which is America and the West is the best and capitalism is the best system and all the people opposing it are evil dictators. That's what Trump thinks. Right? That's what Trump thinks. They agree with that. They agree. Trump thinks that anyone who criticizes Israel is an anti-Semite and a Nazi. That's what they think. They think the same thing as Trump. They share Trump's ideology. It's just the psychology of Trump that they don't like. Trump gives off this vibe of a strong leader who will actually get things done. And that's what so many working class people desperately want right now. They see their relatives dying of opioids. They see the fact that people can't pay their bills, can't feed their kids, their neighborhoods are full of foreclosed homes. They want a strong leader that will take dramatic action to fix this. Working class people want that. And these middle class punks, these spoiled children of the middle class, they see that and they go, I'm scared. And they're scared of it. That is really what it's about. They are afraid. They are afraid not of anything Trump has actually done, but just the idea that state power could be used to fix the economy. And if they ever met actual socialism and actual Marxism, it would scare the bejesus out of them, right? They would be, if they're scared of Trump because he, says mean, nasty things, meet Fidel Castro. Go to the socialist countries. There's a great article from Monthly Review magazine. If you ever go to visit a socialist country, often the leader of the delegation will actually send out this article. It's called How to Visit a Socialist Country. You go to a socialist country, the military is everywhere in socialist countries, right? The military is everywhere. These people, uniforms are fascist. Oh my God. Military. Big in socialist countries, right? In socialist countries, they love their country, right? When you go to Cuba, they'll tell you Cuba is the greatest nation of Latin America. We have built Cuba a strong nation. Oh my God, strong nation. It's like everything these people are about. This middle class, Peter Pan, I don't want to grow up. I want to play video games my whole life. That childishness has nothing to do with what actual socialism is about. Absolutely nothing to do with it, right? You read the Communist Manifesto, right? The means of production will be centralized. The instruments of production centralized into the hands of the state to raise productive forces, right? Not sit on your couch and smoke a bong, right? Raise productive forces as high as possible, right? Read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, right? Production upon a predetermined plan becomes henceforth possible, right? This is actual socialism. Socialism is society, the people taking control of the means of production. And instead of having the banks and the factories and the major industries and the centers of economic power working in order to make people like their dads and their moms and dads rich, it's the banks, factories, and industries being organized to serve public good and not profits. It's eliminating the anarchy of production, the chaos of the market, and it is putting popular power over the control of the economy and centralizing production upon a predetermined plan so that poverty can be eliminated, so that growth can expand to higher levels than ever before. And these people, that scares the crap out of them, right? The state coming in and mobilizing people to go work and get stuff done and pave the roads in their neighborhoods it just scares them. It just scares them. This is a middle class deviation. This is a middle class deviation. It's a pessimistic middle class deviation. And they're suffering too, right? The so-called middle class of the United States is suffering, right? Their standard of living is going down. They don't have the opportunities their parents once had, and that scares them, right? And so their parents might have been all excited to be lawyers and doctors and work hard, and they're sitting there going, I've got college debt, my life sucks. And they're right. The opportunities that they have, even though they are of the middle class, the opportunities that they have compared to what their parents had are not there, right? But for them, socialism is simply an expression of this kind of childish, adolescent rebellion and alienation, where it's their excuse to not do anything. It's really, really childish. It's really, really, really childish, right? And of course, any anti-imperialist country scares the crap out of them, right? In China, as they're zooming ahead, building things, oh my God, as Russia has raised itself up out of poverty. And you look at the achievements of Cuba, Venezuela, this stuff scares the crap out of them, because what they want is they want to smoke a bong and play their PlayStation and think about how the world's about to end. These people want to hear an apocalyptic message. They want to hear a doomsday message. They want to hear that it's hopeless, so there's no point in trying. That's what they want to hear, right? This is what those folks want to hear. But there are millions of people in this country who don't want to hear that. They see what's going on in their neighborhoods and their communities, where their drinking water is not being properly purified, where people in their neighborhood are dying from opioids, they can't pay their bills, they're stuck working at a fast food job when their parents had good factory jobs. They're angry. They're angry, and they want popular power. They want a government of action to fight for working families, to get things done, to come in and not just sit back and let things crumble, but to mobilize the population to destroy capitalism and raise people up from poverty. This is Marxism. This is Marxism. It's not this middle-class wank that these people believe in. And so, of course, it scares the crap out of them. It scares the crap out of them, right? It scares the crap out of them, I probably, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? I spend too much time. I shouldn't argue with these people on Twitter enough, but they are not Marxists. And the right will always win as long as these creeps represent Marxism, right? Because the overwhelming majority of these people in this country are not rich, spoiled suburban kids, right? The overwhelming majority of working people in this country are working class people who sell their labor to survive, who are suffering in this pandemic, who don't have the luxury of just sitting around and playing video games, but actually face actual economic pressure and are forced to go out into the world and struggle to survive. And those folks are they are suffering, and they outnumber these middle class punks by a whole bunch, and they know that, right? And what's amusing is these people, they'll talk against racism, but they do it in this very Ivy League way, right? They've memorized a bunch of words from these Ivy Leagues, kind of like the things you would hear in like an anti-racist training in your workplace or something. But if you go to, black and brown communities, the people in the black and brown communities have a lot in common with white working class people. They tend to be somewhat socially conservative. They're worried about paying their bills. They want stability in their neighborhood, And while, yes, African-American, Latino folks tend to vote Democrat, they don't have, they're nowhere near the bread tube crowd, right? You go to a black and brown neighborhood and you say, hey, I just want everyone to just, sit around and play video games and smoke weed. You're not going to get a lot of support. Among working people of all nationalities, you will have common values. They want their lives to get better. They want stability. They don't want chaos, right? They don't think that people wearing uniforms is Nazi, right? Right? The Black Panthers wore uniforms. The Black Panthers saluted each other. The Black Panthers supported North Korea. The Black Panthers supported China and Mao. The Black Panthers, were sympathetic to the Soviet Union. The Black Panthers sent delegations to Cuba, right? These people would hate the Black Panthers if they ever met them. They only like them now because they never met them, right? Because now they're gone, they're trendy, and there's documentaries about them on PBS. And at their, when they go to college and take the mandatory gender studies class, there's like a Black Panther essay in it. And so they learn that they're supposed to like the Black Panthers. They would hate the Black Panthers. Read Mumia Abu-Jamal's book, We Want Freedom, A Life in the Black Panther Party. Read about how amazing the Black Panthers really were. The amazing work the Black Panthers did. Their strict anti-drug policies, right? The discipline, the way the Black Panthers were organized. I mean, these people would hate the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers would not be a group of people that would want them to sit on their video game and smoke a bong, right? So these people, actual communism, working class people fighting to defend their communities from the greed of billionaires and bankers, fighting to make a better life for their community, is something these people absolutely hate. And of course, they hate it everywhere it's ever happened, right? Everywhere it's ever happened, it's evil Stalinism. They like the revolution part, they like the violence, they like the destruction, they like the chaos, but they don't like the actual socialism part, like the after the smoke clears, when they actually start building and the country starts getting better. They hate that. That's awful, right? It's like Trotskyites. They love the time of Trotsky, when there was an ugly civil war and all kinds of people were dying left and right, and the country was blockaded and couldn't get medicine. Oh yeah, they loved 1921 Russia. But oh no, by the mid-30s, when Stalin was raising millions out of poverty and building hydroelectric power plants, oh, that's awful. This shows how out of touch these people are, right? This is a middle-class chaos cult, right? This is the revolutionary intelligentsia. This is a psychological trend more than a political trend. And this is what we're up against. This is why I wrote City Builders and Vandals. This is why I wrote the book on Kamala Harris, right? There is a destructive impulse that has been hijacked by the status quo. And it calls itself leftism. But it's not leftism. It's not socialism. It's not Marxism. It's something different. Anyway, folks, that's my opening spiel. Not too in-depth today. I just thought I would talk about people I was arguing with on the internet. This isn't a huge thing. I'm not on here. I don't have a big prepared presentation. I'm just thought I'd run my mouth at you a little bit before I go home, before I hop on the train and go home. I'm worried about public transportation here in New York City, right? Already you have to get on it before midnight because they're cleaning it at night because of the pandemic. I'm worried, they're going to lay off thousands of transit workers here in the city. I'm really worried that we're not going to have public transportation in New York City for too much longer, and that's not good at all. All right, folks. All right. So let's do the roll call. Names and locations. I'll call you out as I see you. Names and locations, right? Names and locations. Salem, Oregon. Queens, New York City. San Jose. Belize, Joey. Sam Lebanon, Los Angeles. Union, New Jersey. Niagara Falls. Exeter. Ben. Lily from Atlanta. Looking forward to CPI. Ben in Brattle, Vermont. Wow, that really sucks. Cleveland Pirate Alex, Oakland, California, Newark, New Jersey, Lee County, North Carolina, Dust James, Maryland, Jenny Lynn in Cincinnati, Ohio, NYC, Me Classified. Have you ever been to North Carolina? Yes, I have. Sicily, Campbell, California, Next Republic of Puerto Rico, Bill from the United States, Sham from the RTA Cleveland. I remember the RTA in Cleveland. I used to ride that all the time. I would ride the Rapid. I'd ride those buses. Sao Paulo, Brazil, Terre Haute. Did I just accidentally made somebody a moderator, which is a little bit weird. Okay, I was trying to change the chat and I made somebody a moderator. That was weird. Okay, wow, alrighty. Killian, Texas, very good. Reem Beam, Auckland, New Zealand. Mohsen from Iran, Frankfurt, Germany, Los Angeles, South Carolina, Rio de Janeiro, Norway. You can do it my way or you can do it Norway. Based New Mods, Ithaca, New York, Michael. Very, very good. Hello from Fairhope, Alabama. Fairhope, Alabama. Max the Sax is with us. Albany, New York. Julian from Texas, who is also now a moderator. I'm trusting you, Julian. That was a complete accident, but I don't think I can undo it. So be happy with what you got. DC, Balthazar, Oakland Panthers, Plymouth, UK, North Carolina, Jenny Lynn. Hey, right, technical difficulties. You have the power, Julian. Oh boy, probably need more mods. West Texas, very good. Very, very, very good, right? I should make like somebody else a mod too, right? I mean, if I'm gonna make people mods by accident, right? Kieran from San Diego, right? San Diego D King. Yes, you can undo it, Caleb. Oh, I'm gonna take the power away from Julian. Well, you know, if you use your power well, Julian, I will not unmod you. But I'm watching you. You know, this is your test period. Use your powers well. All right. There you go. East Coast. This is revisionism, says Tricky Dick. Exactly. I really doubt that the Soviet leaders or the hardline Marxist-Leninists would have ever. Anyway. All right. Kingston, Ontario, Canada. Julian did nothing wrong. Mike, make the mod and chaos unfold. Happy accidents. Hey, folks, we are like a community here. We have running jokes. Right? And we have fun together. Good stuff. Wrench Gang. I'm sure that's a reference to the Monkey Wrench Gang, the eco-terrorism novel. Who else is with us? I'll give you names and locations, folks. I'll call you out. Gloucester, United Kingdom. Very, very good. Gloucester. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Leipzig, East Germany, Vallejo, California, Jason Sarna, Joey Gloister. Gloister is how you say it. Wow, okay. Mike in Austin. Berlin, Germany, Oakland, California, Whitby, Washington, Santana, California, Gloucester. All right, very good. Well, you know, it's like, it was really confusing because next to the little town I grew up in, there's a town called Worcester, but it was not spelled Worcester. It was just Worcester, Wooster. So it was really confusing. Shaniqua from Buffalo, New York. And so I saw the Worcester, Massachusetts, and that was not spelled like Worcester, you know, Ohio. It was totally different spelling, but pronounced the same way. I didn't get it, you know, so there you go. Not far from Greenland. All righty. Miguel from Puerto Rico. Very good. Skid Row. Wow. Skid Row. Mansfield Prison. Do they have the internet in prisons these days? Alrighty, folks. Okay. Super chat questions. Keep them rolling in, by the way. Anti-communists, why are they so intellectually lazy? Well, and clearly, folks, communism doesn't work because of human nature. Right? So all these people in China and in North Korea and in Venezuela and in Russia and in Cuba are all just so stupid they don't understand that human beings are just naturally greedy. And clearly, if somebody would just go there and say, hey, people are naturally greedy, communism fails, they would all just go, oh, of course, and they would just immediately stop being communists. Come on, right? It's that simple, right? Right? I mean, why haven't they already done that? If someone would just go, the CIA needs to invent a program where they send you know, kids who just took 5th grade social studies class on a plane to China, and they can walk up to everyone and say, human beings are naturally greedy. And then everyone in China will just go, Thanks for clearing that up. Oh boy. And that'll be the end of communism, right? I mean, I don't know why they never thought of this before, right? Clearly, this human nature argument that we all heard in second grade completely demolishes communism, right? Because what communists believe is that everyone should share everything no matter what, right? That's clearly what we all believe. I mean, all of Capital, all the thousands of pages of Capital, all they said was everyone should divide up everything absolutely equally, and people should get free stuff from the government. That's what it says, right? Our ideology, and clearly that wouldn't work because people are just naturally greedy, right? So I don't know what you mean about communists being anti-communists being intellectually lazy, because clearly, I mean, we're the intellectually lazy ones. I mean, you'd have to be an idiot to believe that everyone should get paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work, and the government should just give people free stuff all the time, right? And especially the belief that we shouldn't have freedom of speech or freedom of assembly, that freedom is bad because it takes away from people being equal. My goodness, I mean, we are just such idiots. And Albert Einstein, why did he write that essay, Why Socialism, for Monthly Review magazine? I mean, this is the smartest man in history of physicists, but clearly he believed everyone should just get paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work, and he must have been an idiot, right? And he praised the Soviet Union and all of that. He must have been an idiot. And John Steinbeck, who wrote The Grapes of Wrath, one of the greatest novels, must have just been a pure idiot, because everybody knows you can't share everything. Communism is just an idea for dumb people, right? Anti-communism, it gets on my nerves. It's not that they disagree with me, it's the arrogance. It's the arrogance of it, right? They assume that they know what we believe. They only know a caricature of what we believe. They know a grotesque caricature. These people who don't know anything. They don't even know what capitalism is. They think capitalism is having money or something. Like they know a gross caricature, but they are so arrogant to assume that the entire 20th century, how many people died in the Chinese Revolution? How many people died in the Russian Revolution? How many people died in the Korean War and the Vietnam War? How many people died fighting for communism? During World War II, when they would execute communist resistance fighters to the Nazis, you know what they would do? They would raise their fists in the air and they would shout, Stalin! And they would just shout, Stalin! At the top of their lungs. Clearly, no one told these people that Stalin was the worst mass murderer in history and the Soviet Union never accomplished anything. I mean, it's like these people, right? The arrogance of these people to assume that the entire history of the 20th century was just all these people that were so stupid they couldn't understand what their kindergarten teacher told them about, oh, you can't share everything. I mean, the arrogance. I mean, if these people stopped to think about this, right? So the 20th century, World War I, was ended. You had the Russian Revolution, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, right? All the civil wars in Latin America, all these people that were picking up guns and fighting and dying for communism all just wanted everyone to get paid the exact same wage and never understood the human nature. I mean, it's the arrogance of these people. The arrogance of these people. It drives you crazy, right? It's like, has it ever occurred to these people, it's like, Islam is not my religion, right? I am not a Muslim, but I know that Islam has, obviously, there's things about the Islamic faith that motivate people to go out and do things. I don't think all Muslims are idiots. I think there's a deep, beautiful intellectual tradition in Islam, right? And I may not agree with it, but I want to learn about it and I want to know what they believe. I'm not of the Jewish religion, but I know there's a deep intellectual tradition of rabbis and Talmudic scholars, and that there's a lot of profundity that, but it's like these people, there's this arrogance, right? They know everything. And all these people that believe in communism are just completely idiots, right? It never occurs to them, right? Never occurs to them, right? I'm not a libertarian. I vehemently disagree with libertarianism, but I know that there are many smart libertarians out there. There are many very, very smart libertarians out there. I don't think all libertarians are idiots, right? I'm interested in what libertarians believe and understanding it. But anti-communists have no interest in understanding it. They know these childlike cliches, one or two cliches, and that settles it, right? And it never worked anywhere, the whole 20th century. It's so annoying. It is so annoying to me. The arrogance, right? The arrogance, right? The arrogance of these people, right? No interest in learning what all these people fought and died for. No interest in learning what people might believe. They assume that they know, and that all the people throughout history that believed in communism are just idiots. That's what they believe. I mean, it is the most obnoxious, arrogant thing, right? It's one thing to be ignorant, but to not want to know and to assume that you do know is one of the most obnoxious things. It gets under my nerves. So thank you for asking that question. All righty. Vermont, how do we break free? Well, the main way that people are going to break free in our time, I'm just telling you, is by coming together. And that sounds like an oxymoron. You usually think break free means going out on your own. But actually, in a time of economic crisis, when people are suffering and they don't have much, in order to be free, you need to join arm in arm with other people. You need to build a collective. You need to build a community where people can depend on each other and count on each other. That is what you need to do. You need to build a community. You need to build a family. You need to have a network of people who depend on each other and trust each other and are loyal to each other. You need to build a community. That is the first thing you need to do in order to break free. And then second of all, you need to teach that community scientific socialism. You need to get that community together, and you need to have them study Marx, you need to have them study Lenin, you need to have them study Gaddafi, you need to have them study Che Guevara, you need to have them study all kinds of socialist theory, and you need to get that community to actively struggle against the system, to take care of each other, to come together, to be there for each other, to make sure that they're cared for, bring the community together, educate and train the community so that it can struggle for a new world. That is how you will break free, and that is what I hope to do. I want to build a community of people dedicated to bringing capitalism down. Peacefully, I advocate a peaceful transition, but I want to build a community of people who love and trust each other and are ready to live in struggle for a new world, right? That is what we need. You're asking me what you and your comrades in Vermont should do. That is what I think you should do, right? You should come together. You should not be alone. This system drives people apart. People assume that the problems they have are unique, right? And that's what they do. They always say that the problems are unique, right? If you can't find a job, well, it's just because you're a loser. No, it's because this system is eliminating jobs. Oh, if you have trouble with drug addiction, right? Well, that's just because you're a loser. You made poor choices. Lock them up. No, there is a whole culture that is breeding addiction. There's the whole opioid industry. No, you are not alone. You're not isolated, right? And that the way out of this nightmare is working people coming together, building community, loving each other, trusting each other, and studying the world and struggling. Romania National Socialism. That is a weird question. All right. Okay, platypus. The Platypus Affiliated Society, are they still around? I remember them when they started. Around the time of the financial crisis, 2010, I think, there was something called the Platypus Affiliated Society. And they were started, and they were a group of people that were really into Marxism. Group of people that were really into Marxism. And they were basically pro-imperialist. I believe the leader was Chris something, and he had been a former Spartacist who supported the Gulf War. He supported the U.S. war against Iraq. And basically, if you kind of got to know them, they were like former Trotskyists who were pro-imperialist. They thought the U.S. invasion of Iraq was a good thing. And they were really into Marx. They hated Lenin. They said that the Russian Revolution of 1917 was the worst thing that ever happened to Marxism. They had this slogan, "The left is dead, long live the left." And their whole thing, they were first worldists, kind of the opposite of third worldists. They were first worldists. They thought all Marxism and socialism that happened in the third world was barbaric and awful. And they wanted to build a first world Marxism, a first world chauvinist Marxism. I will never forget being at a literature table. And this happened to me at the U.S. Social Forum in 2010, the second U.S. Social Forum in Detroit. I was sitting at the literature table of my respective Marxist group, And they walked up, a member of the platypus-affiliated society, walked up to the table, and for some reason they don't blink. They have like the eyes where they don't blink. It always made me think it was like a cult or something, but I don't know what they do internally. And he walks up to the table, and he sees a button for Mumia Abu Jamal, the political prisoner. And he says, "What does Mumia have to do with the working class?" And I said, well, Mumia Abu Jamal was a leader of the Black Panther Party that fought for the rights of black workers. Mumia Abu Jamal was a journalist who was exposing police brutality in Philadelphia. And he cuts me off. He says, Mumia Abu Jamal was a thug. He and the Black Panthers went around robbing working class people. He was a lumpen thug. And I was like, excuse me? A lumpen thug? Are you kidding me? He was a lumpen thug who robbed working class people. If you were really a socialist organization, you would want Mumia Abu Jamal to be dead. See, you guys you don't fight for the working class. You fight for black nationalism, and black nationalism is anti-Semitic. And I was just sitting there and I was like, are you kidding me? And, and this is the whole group I got the impression they existed to troll leftists. That was what I got the impression that they were about, that they were something set up to like troll leftists, because he said that to me, and I was kind of in disbelief, right, that I was hearing this. But, there's other leftists, you might say what he just said, and they'd punch you. I didn't punch him. I'm not a violent fellow, right? But I was just kind of in disbelief that someone who would call themselves a leftist would come up to me and advocate the execution of Mumia. But this is how they were, right? And then you get to know, there's some people who would go to their little conferences and classes, and that everything that they did was very subtly kind of pushing the idea that the U.S. invasion of Iraq was a good thing if you're a true Marxist. That if you're a good, true Marxist, you kind of sort of should support the USA invading Iraq. They were kind of like some kind of weird intellectual experiment of like Marxist neocons. Right? And it was all kind of touted in this arrogance, right? If you said to them, you liked Mao. What did Mao ever say about Marxist theory of the surplus value of the, it was this arrogance, like we're so smart. And it was like they were the opposite of third worldists, right? Third worldists think all that matters is what's happening in the third world. These people had the opposite perspective. All that matters is in the first world. And they were pro-imperialist leftists, basically. That's what they were. And they always gave me the creeps, kind of. And I always got the impression they were kind of a cult, because like the eyes, when there's a group of people walking around going, and they don't blink, that's always a sign something's not right. So they always gave me kind of a weird vibe. And I didn't encounter them that much. They weren't, I saw them in Occupy Wall Street, passing out leaflets one time or something like that. I saw that once or twice, but for the most part, I didn't see them around because they weren't really activists, right? They were just kind of this academic group. They would have like conferences and stuff. I just never got a good vibe from them. And they wouldn't, if you would actually straight up confront them about supporting the Iraq War, if you would straight up ask them about supporting the Iraq War, they would never actually like straight up tell you. They'd be like, well, maybe it's good, I remember when they announced their organization, they did a radio interview. And in the interview, they insisted that U.S. Attorney General, former U.S. Attorney General, Ramsey Clark, who I've had the great honor of working with, a great American hero. I mean, very few Americans have done as much as Ramsey Clark did to fight for the people of the world. And I mean, they told me that they said in this radio interview that Ramsey Clark was right-wing because he had been Saddam Hussein's lawyer. And I remember that's when they announced their organization. They did this radio interview, and they said, well, Ramsey Clark is right-wing because he was Saddam Hussein's lawyer. And, it's like the notion that the U.S. imperialists invaded Iraq, destroyed a country, put the leader on trial, he's trying to expose this. No. And then they said something like, Bush is bad, but he never committed genocide. And it's like, I think the U.S. imperialists have committed lots of genocides. Platypus always gave me a bad vibe. They would probably, unfortunately though, because they're like left critical, which I am too, right? I'm left critical now. I mean, you heard me just rant and rave against Vosh and all of them. I am because I'm left critical and they are, I might get put in the same category with them according to some people, and they might even, demagogically agree with some of the things I was saying about middle-class leftists. But when it comes to imperialism, right, and capitalism in our time is imperialism. Big multinational companies, cartels dominating the global economy, keeping countries poor. Capitalism is imperialism. When it comes to imperialism, they're not anti-imperialist. And I'm sorry, but Leninism and anti-imperialism and the national question, this is essential. If anything, they are class reductionist. They're actually class reductionist. Class reductionist doesn't mean anyone who ever talks about class. It means people who don't acknowledge things like imperialism, people who don't acknowledge things like the national and oppression of black people who don't acknowledge anything but class, right? If it's all just workers and bosses, that's class reductionism. And I would say that Platypus, they are actually class reductionists, which is interesting to think about. Okay, anyway. What is post-leftism? I believe there's a number of people that are frustrated with the left because of Biden, because of people like Vosh, and because of that, I think they're calling themselves post-left. Some of them are actually supporting Trump, but I'll have to look into it more. I don't want to speak about it without, proper knowledge. Let me put it that way. You never want to speak about anything unless you really know what you're going to say. So I don't want to say... I don't want to, put anything on these people that is not accurate. So I don't want to do that. Okay. Will censorship fade in China? Well, yeah, we've seen, right? There's a lot more freedom of religion in China now than there once was. There's a lot more freedom of speech in China than there once was, especially with social media. And that as societies become more prosperous, they tend to become more open. However, there's another factor, which is how much instability there is. If China's invaded, it's going to be very authoritarian, right? If the USA is able to foment some kind of color revolution like they've done in Hong Kong, right? Hong Kong is becoming more authoritarian. Why? Why do you think that is? Why do you think Hong Kong's becoming more authoritarian? Have you turned on your TV lately? The U.S. NGOs have been tearing the place up. The Pepe the Frog protesters have been beating people up and lighting people on fire. So yeah, they're locking down. They're locking and loading, and they're, and that's how it works, right? When a society is unstable and it's being destabilized, when there is a lot of poverty, societies out of necessity become very authoritarian. But as societies become more prosperous, they tend to open up more. If you want the socialist countries to have more freedom, which I do, if you want the socialist countries to have more civil liberties, which I do, then you should want the U.S. imperialists to leave them the hell alone. Right? You should want the U.S. imperialists to stop destabilizing them with protests. You should want the USA to lift its sanctions on them. Right? The USA says it loves human rights, and I have a whole rant about that. But yeah, if you really want freedom, if you really want things to improve in terms of human rights in developing countries, especially in socialist countries, you should want the USA to leave them alone, right? The USA does not care about anyone. The USA loves the Saudi autocrats that cut people's heads off and are murdering people all over Yemen. They have no, they don't give me that, right? The human rights rhetoric is loaded with hypocrisy. It is propaganda to destroy countries. That's all it is. So don't give me that. Don't give me that. The human rights thing. You know what I mean? The people who installed Pinochet, they care about human rights. Really? Every military junta in Latin America, right? The Saudi regime, every sheikh and king in that region, the Bahrain autocracy. Give me a break. Give me a break, right? The Kuwaiti monarchy. There's so many autocratic regimes throughout the Middle East that are just like this with America, with the United States, and these people, they support them, and they support the United States, and so don't tell me the United States is spreading human rights around the world, right? Right? That is just ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. Anti-Marxist communism. That's interesting, right? One could argue that utopianism is kind of an anti-Marxist communism, right? Utopian socialism, right? The early Christian church where they held all things in common. You could argue that. You could argue that there are communes throughout the United States. There are utopian communities throughout the United States. I think in India there are Europeans who have set up some utopian communities in India, and they just live out in the middle of the woods and do their thing. And there are communist, in terms of communist meaning everyone shares everything, and communal utopian socialist communities around the world. I guess that's anti-Marxist communism because that's not Marxist, right? That's utopianism. That's we're going to build our ideal world in the middle of the woods. But that's one thing. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think that there are socialisms that are anti-Marxist, right? I think that there's a lot of forms of socialism that reject one or two aspects of Marxism. Baathism is heavily influenced by Marxism, but it rejects aspects of Marxism as well. Baathist Arab socialism, for example. Gaddafi, right? He was heavily influenced by Marxism, but his Islamic socialism was not Marxist. It was Islamic. Bolivarianism is very, very heavily influenced by Marxism, but it has a strand of indigenous traditions in it. It has a strand of social democracy in it. It has a strand of radical environmentalism in it. Bolivarianism, I would say, is not explicitly Marxist. It's heavily influenced by Marxism, and that there are different, the ruling ideology, the slogan in Nicaragua, it's painted on all the walls. It's like the slogan of the government is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity, right? Are the Sandinistas Marxists? Well, they're influenced by Marxism, and you can't really be a socialist and not be influenced by Marxism. But there's a lot of non-Marxist socialism in the world today, I would say. There's a lot of governments around the world that are anti-imperialist, that are against capitalism, and have set up a socialist society, but maybe they don't adhere to Marxism-Leninism, right? That's not their state ideology. And I think that it is a mistake when socialists insist that, no, if you're not explicitly a Marxist-Leninist, you're not a socialist. No, I think the Baath countries are socialist. I think the Bolivarian countries are socialist. I think that China, with its market economy, is socialist, right? And that there are other examples of this around the world. And I don't think we should be dogmatic, but so maybe that's what you're asking. Okay, I don't know about the Macy's conferences, but if you want to talk about cybernetics and all of that, you should really check out my video that I made about Silicon Valley and the roots of Silicon Valley, where I talk about Zbigniew Brzezinski and his writings on all of this, and I talk about Marilyn Ferguson, and I talk about where Google came from, and where the NSA and the CIA and their whole history of setting up Silicon Valley, and what the Silicon Valley fascists want, and Hillary Clinton and her State Department. You got to watch this video I did on Silicon Valley. It's getting a decent number of views. You got to share it, right? This is who's going to rule us for the next 4 years. Trump is done. Trump is out, right? The transition has already started. We are going to have the administration of Joe Biden. And Joe Biden is the Silicon Valley man, right? And Kamala Harris was like handpicked by Silicon Valley, right? Some people suspect that maybe Me Too will start up again once Joe Biden has been in office for a few months, right? And that Joe Biden will be forced out due to Me Too or something like that, right? Joe Biden does not have a good record with women, I'll tell you that much. And that all these allegations that got swept under the rug during the election to beat Trump, now that Kamala is VP, suddenly Joe Biden's record of being creepy and inappropriate with women might suddenly come back and force him to step down so Kamala can be president. I'm just saying, it may not happen. It may be that Joe Biden will just be convinced to step down. He's old, getting Alzheimer's, tired, wants to spend time with his grandkids. Maybe he'll complete his 4 years, right? Maybe who knows, right? Who knows? But many people are wondering if Biden will make it for 4 years, because it's very clear that they couldn't get the voters to vote for Kamala Harris because she's atrocious. She gives a bad vibe. She's a bad, scary person, right? She's a sadist. She's demented. She's motivated by a drive for cruelty. She gives people a bad vibe. When Tulsi Gabbard, called her out and said all the things, you look at Kamala Harris, you look at the way she talks, the way that mean voice, it's true. It's true that she sadistically prosecuted people, that she tried to keep an innocent man on death row. It's true when you look at Kamala Harris, right? Yeah, just listen to her voice, right? Look into her life story and you'll know why. That's why I wrote a book on it. But Kamala Harris is who the Silicon Valley fascists want. That permanent revolution faction that loved the Arab Spring, that wants to just have permanent instability so that Wall Street can dominate the global economy. That faction, they picked Kamala, and Silicon Valley is all ready to get the Revolution Incorporated engines rolling again, right? To start tearing down governments and fomenting instability and funding extremists and terrorists to overthrow anti-imperialist states and spread chaos all over the world. They are revved up and ready for that, right? And Joe Biden may not be the guy to do it for him, right? I mean, he's collaborated with them all and all that, but, in his second term, in his second term as vice president, he worked with Obama to sign the nuclear deal, to have good relations with Cuba. Joe Biden may not be the guy to do it. Kamala is psyched up and ready to kill. Psyched up and ready to kill. She wants regime change. She wants chaos. She wants instability throughout the world. She wants to punish people. She wants to harm people, right? I mean, she proved it when she was a prosecutor. She has no remorse about the things she has done, the evil things that she has done. She is ready to destroy, kill, rip, and tear, right? She is primed to do it. And, she very, very well could be the next president. And I feel like, maybe Biden will just let her do it as vice president. But I have a feeling that Biden won't finish out his term. Now, whether or not the way that Kamala takes office is with a Me Too scandal for Biden, or with Biden just retiring, or I don't know, but I have a feeling Kamala is going to be president within 4 years. That's my suspicion. And Silicon Valley is behind Kamala. All right, which Broadway plays did the Congress for Cultural Freedom fund? That's actually a very interesting question, because the Congress for Cultural Freedom, they funded the movie of George Orwell's Animal Farm that came out in the early 60s. They funded that. They had someone on the board of all the Hollywood studios. There's a very good book by Joel Whitney. It's called Finks, How the CIA Tricked the World's Greatest Writers. And it talks about how the Congress for Cultural Freedom manipulated James Baldwin. It talks about a lot of the activities that were involved with the Congress for Cultural Freedom. And I suspect Broadway play stuff is in there. I don't recall any Broadway plays being mentioned in that particular book, but I'm sure it's in there. So that's an interesting angle, right? I don't recall which Broadway plays they supported, but it's interesting, right? But yeah, I mean, they were big in Hollywood. In Hollywood, the Congress for Cultural Freedom operated. They sponsored all kinds of stuff. The CIA has a big budget, right? I mean, these people who think that no, it never happened, it's anti-Semitic to mention it, well, they funded a lot of stuff. All righty. Oh, did the painting turn off? Look at that. The painting turned right back on. All righty. Used to be funny. Like the first time I did that, it was funny. It's not funny anymore. It's just a fact of life. Sometimes you have to turn the painting back on. Luckily, every painting has a remote. All right, was Romania Nazbol? No, I mean, Romania was it started out as a people's democracy, right? It was an alliance of the various anti-fascist parties. They eventually merged into the Romanian Workers' Party, which became the Romanian Communist Party, Ceausescu, a lot of industrialization. I think the biggest mistake of Romania was that they, got in debt to American banks and had some austerity in the 80s. There were a lot of cuts in social spending. That was a big mistake. Romania, it had its problems, but it accomplished a lot economically. I mean, in terms of building hospitals, wiping out illiteracy, industrializing the country. Great source on this is the U.S. State Department, or the U.S. Library of Congress, actually published, interestingly, they published a country study of every country in the world during the 1980s, and all the socialist countries. And they have economic data in there about the achievements of these socialist countries. And you can read it. This is the U.S. Library of Congress. If the U.S. Library of Congress is lying to make communists look good, well, we got a big problem then, don't we, right? I quote it all the time when I'm talking about Eastern Europe, when I'm talking about various countries from around the world, North Korea, Albania, countries like that. Read the country studies of the socialist countries that existed in the 1980s, right? And you can read all about their economic achievements in terms of building schools, building universities, right? Infrastructure, big achievements. What socialism did in Eastern Europe after World War II, mobilizing people to build, was unprecedented. Capitalism would never have done that. Capitalism likes to keep countries poor, captive markets, right? But it was socialism, mobilizing the population to construct, right? I've told the story that when I was in school, my parents we hosted a student from Bulgaria, and he was not a communist, but he told the story about how his grandfather was a very enthusiastic communist, because he remembered how right after World War II, his grandfather and all the young men had gone out to build roads all throughout Bulgaria, right? And Bulgaria did not have very many roads at the time, and it was this beautiful sense of brotherhood and collectivism, right? To go out and build the roads, right? No one gives any credit, but it's true. All right, cool. And then the last super chat I got is, are you opposed to arming the working class? Okay, the United States, we have this thing called the Constitution, and the Constitution has amendments, and the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right to own a firearm, right? I mean, that's how the Supreme Court interprets it. Some people say, well, it doesn't mean that. Well, the way this, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees individuals the right to own a firearm. I am not opposed to that. That doesn't mean I'm not sensitive to people that have concerns about gun control. I know a lot of people with kids who are just terrified of sending their kids to school and having, the latest, Nazi, white nationalist, incel killer, show up for school that day and shoot up the place and kill their kid, and they're worried about that. And, I don't blame them. I don't blame them. I mean, I'm not a parent, but if I were a parent, I'm sure I would be terrified, right? So I understand why there's a lot of people that are socialists and communists, a lot of people that are revolutionary that at this point they feel like, look, maybe we need to have some gun control. And honestly, I used to be very, very fired up in opposition to gun control, and I don't get fired up about it anymore, right? It's not like we have a revolutionary movement, and this is a different situation. And I don't talk about the issue of gun control that much, but you're asking me, am I in favor of arming the working class? I don't think we should get rid of the Second Amendment. I don't think we should, outlaw firearms, right? I might be okay with some restrictions. I might be, I don't know, honestly. I'm at the point where I just don't talk about gun control as much anymore because of the sensitivity. And the thing is also, I live in New York City, right? I live in Brooklyn. New York City is like the most gun-controlled part of the country. You cannot have a hunting rifle here without a permit, and that permit to get it is impossible. The only way you could really have a gun in New York City legally is if you're like an armed security guard or a cop. If you're not a cop and you're not an armed security guard, forget owning a gun in this city. You ain't gonna do it. It ain't gonna happen. Not a hunting rifle, not a self-defense pistol. You just forget it. This city, there's no guns here. And so I don't own any firearms. And, when I was a kid, my dad and I went and shot, my grandpa too, we all went and shot a shotgun. I think my grandpa gave me he did. He gave me a shotgun when I turned 18. I never possessed it. I think I just gave it back to my dad. I didn't want it. It was never really mine. But, I grew up in a culture where people had guns and people were armed, and that's, it's Midwestern America, right? And, but here in New York City, you forget it, right? If they find a gun in your house and you don't have a permit for it and you're going to jail 2, 3, 10 years, something like that, they don't mess around here with that. This is the most gun-controlled, part of the city or part of the country. And what was part of that gun control policy they had here in New York City? What was a big gun control policy here in New York City? Stop and frisk. You ever heard of stop and frisk? That was the police had the right to pat you down to look for weapons without any just cause. They'd see you and go, pat you down. And it was black people that they did it to. It was black men, mainly. It was a form of racial profiling. And there were all kinds of protests against stop and frisk. Cornel West would go out and protest it. The RCP would go out and protest it. The DSA, all kinds of civil disobediences against stop and frisk. I never once saw the National Rifle Association attend any of those protests. The leading anti-gun control organization never once sent anybody to go and get arrested in a civil disobedience against stop and frisk. Stop and frisk in New York City was a gun control policy, right? That's what it was. The police, not only are you not allowed to have a gun, which the NRA is supposed to be about your right to own a gun, but in order to make sure you don't have a gun, the police can search you without just cause at any time. Now, if you were to implement that policy in Alabama, you were to implement that policy in Oklahoma, the National Rifle Association would be all over it, the militia guys would be down there, but they implemented it in New York City. It's primarily used against low-income African Americans, and they go, and that exposes what they're all about, right? The NRA, it's tied in with the Pentagon and weapons manufacturers. They're trying to sell guns. That's the main thing the NRA is about. It's a marketing gimmick. It's not a political organization. They're trying to make money. Right? It's about making money. And so it's like they want you to be afraid of black people, right? They want to appeal to like a racist, desire, a fear of crime. They want people to be terrified of black people. So the idea of protecting black people's right not to get randomly searched on the street and humiliated in front of people, and why would they do that, right? I mean, they want to whip up racist fear right? So it just shows what a gimmick the NRA is. I don't really have any respect for the NRA at all, right? I may not be an advocate of outlawing firearms, but I'm not an advocate of the National Rifle Association. I mean, they're awful. They are just absolutely awful, the National Rifle Association. I mean, just in so many ways, everything, I mean, where were they on stop and frisk? I mean, where were they? I mean, was there ever a single NRA rally against stop and frisk? Right? Did I ever see an NRA speaker at a stop and frisk rally? Never, 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 never. Never did I see that, But, there are socialists around the country who have formed some kind of like gun clubs and all of that. I have nothing to do with any of that. I have nothing to do with it. If you do that, that's on your business. But people that associate with me and people that are working with me, you work with them or you work with me, right? I cannot have anything to do with that, right? I mean, folks know with my job and all that, I'm in a very sensitive position. And so if you're doing the gun club thing, stay the hell away from me, right? I'm not, you should be allowed to do it, and the government has no right to tell you to not do it. That's your business if you do that, but stay away from me. I'm in a sensitive spot, and the last thing I want to be associated with is some kind of gun club or, I have nothing to do with any armed group. Any group of people that's together with guns, they're miles away from me because I have nothing to do with them. So don't ask, and I'm warning you, please, if you're somebody who wants to do that, I respect your right to do that. That's your business, but stay the hell away from me when you do it. Don't have anything to do with me because I've traveled internationally and all that, and I want absolutely nothing to do with anyone who has any guns. Let me just put it that way. I mean, if you're a legal gun owner, that's your personal business. But if you're forming some kind of gun club or something, stay the hell away from me because that's not the position I want to be in. All right, thoughts on Noam Chomsky calling Lenin right wing? Noam Chomsky is an interesting one. He was like Ahmadinejad versus Rouhani in terms of foreign policy differences. Okay, we're writing it down, right? That's okay. You guys want me to keep going? I'll keep going. So we got Chomsky, and then we got Rouhani v. Ahmadinejad. All right, so Noam Chomsky. It's interesting. I will never forget when I was first getting interested in Marxism. I got on Wikipedia as a teenager, and I printed out a list of American communists or American Marxists. I went to Barnes & Noble. Or it wasn't Barnes & Noble. There used to be this store that went out of business. It was called Borders. Folks know Borders? It's not around anymore. So I went to the counter, and that was back in the days of CDs before MP3s became a big thing. And so, I went to the, it's Borders, books and music. I went in there. Behind the counter, there's a girl with 3 nose piercings and purple hair. Big thank you for everything you were doing. My family were Baathists in the 60s and 70s, and you're so right about everything. Well, thank you. I like to think I'm right about everything. If I thought I was wrong, I wouldn't say it. But thank you. I'm glad you appreciate my work. So, I go to the counter, and there's this girl, and she's got 16 nose piercings and, blue hair, and I'm exaggerating, of course. But it's the punk rock look. She's chewing her gum. She doesn't want to be there, right? And I'm this annoying guy. And I walk up, and I'm like, I want to see if you have any books by American Marxists. And she's like, okay. Who? And so I start, I've got the list right in front of me. So I just start reading off names. It's in alphabetical order. Martin Aburn. No, and she just keeps reading off the list, right? And of course, it's every obscure, it's a Wikipedia list. So finally we get to the C's. Noam Chomsky. Yeah, we got him. And she takes me over to the, social issues or whatever section of the bookstore. She points to where all the Noam Chomsky books are, and then she runs away as fast as she can before I make her type in some more things. I thought it was cute. It's actually kind of funny. I don't know if people have had that experience at bookstores where it's the person behind the counter doesn't really want to help you, so she ran away after that. And they had, I think, I bought the book Power and Terror, and I read his book 9/11 about why 9/11 happened, and I ended up watching Manufacturing Consent, the documentary that he made, and I mean, Noam Chomsky's Noam Chomsky, right? I mean, he's the leftist, right? I mean, he's the big left wing intellectual of the United States, right? What Uncle Sam really wants. I mean, and I mean, he's pretty basic. He consists of just pointing out things about foreign policy that are pretty widely obscured, like CIA coups, like, U.S., you know, um, honestly, during the Cold War, he said a lot more things that I agree with, right? During the Cold War, when it came to Nicaragua, when it came to, the Middle East and stuff, he was a little bit better. Now, now it's more the left wing of imperialism that engages in regime change and stuff. And he's, on Syria and other places, he's said some things that are just dead wrong. Dead wrong. And, he functions as a bit of a gatekeeper on a lot of issues, right? He will, the fact that, great example, right? The movie JFK came out. It was about the Kennedy assassination. It's widely believed among American leftists that the assassination of John F. Kennedy came from the right wing. That Kennedy was seen as being too liberal, too left wing. The military-industrial complex thought he wasn't pro-Vietnam enough. Well, Noam Chomsky and Howard Zinn both, doubled down on this. No. You can't ask questions about the Kennedy assassination because Kennedy did the Bay of Pigs invasion, so he was just a normal, imperialist. And if you ask questions about the Kennedy assassination, you're not acknowledging that Kennedy was an imperialist. And it's like, Kennedy was an imperialist, but there were differences among the bourgeoisie, but you're not allowed to ask that question. Yes, the Parenti lecture on it is amazing. And it's like, he kind of plays that role, right? It's like, he kind of, he's got this title as the king of leftism, he's the king of leftism. And if Chomsky says you're not allowed to discuss this, then thou shalt not discuss it. And that's wrong. And there's some criticism you can make of his lecturing style. I mean, if you see him speak enough times, which I have in person and, the audio tapes, you'll start to notice there are certain intellectual tricks that he does. But I think any speaker, right? People could probably, people listen to my speeches. You can probably find certain patterns that I have, certain themes that come back when I speak. So any speaker does that, right? Any speaker, especially if you speak as much as he did. So there are certain things that he'll start to say. It's actually, I had an interaction with Noam Chomsky. Type into YouTube, Caleb Maupin, Noam Chomsky. He was at the United Nations speaking, and he and I had a back and forth. And I actually asked him about rather relevant issue about nuclear scientists being assassinated in Iran. Pretty wild. So Google Caleb Maupin, Noam Chomsky, and you'll see a video of me and Noam. He answers my question with the 4 Ds of dodgeball. Dodge, dip, duck, and dodge. That's how he answered my question. I think it's kind of funny. But he's, I don't know. I mean, Noam Chomsky, he says a lot of good things. There's a lot of people who would never be exposed to a criticism of U.S. foreign policy if it weren't for him. He is what he is. I mean, he's not where I'm at. I'm very different than him. And I think that he's gotten a little bit worse over the years, but some of his stuff is right on. His critique of Antifa, I totally agree with, right? I think that he's absolutely right. That why in the world would you escalate to an armed struggle with the right wing right now? Like that would be like the stupidest thing you could possibly do, and that that setting a precedent where people start killing each other over political ideas. That's an escalation that the country, probably wouldn't benefit from. And his writings on the Tea Party, I didn't think it at the time. At the time the Tea Party was happening, I disagreed with him. But he's actually right. He was right. He said, look, the left should instead focus on how it can win over average Americans who might join the Tea Party rather than how it can, spit on them and call them fascist. I think he was right about that. Noam Chomsky was right. So every so often, I really agree with him. He's a left-wing intellectual. I think that I don't want to say too much more about him, right? That, you can learn a lot from his material. Let me leave it at that. He's Noam Chomsky, and, you can learn a lot by reading his material. He has a lot of good things to say. Sometimes he's not where I'm at. Sometimes he is where I'm at. How's that for an answer? All right, cool. And the last super chat question I've got is the difference between Rouhani and Ahmadinejad in terms of foreign policy. You know, the difference in a lot of ways was, well, the main thing was that Rouhani presented Ahmadinejad as if Ahmadinejad was this crazy radical, and that was hurting Iran. So when Rouhani ran for president, it was all about, Rouhani, it was all about Ahmadinejad is a crazy radical, but I am a moderate. I am going to negotiate with the United States, and I'm going to fix things. So Rouhani got in, and with the permission of Iran's supreme leader, expand more on Pax Romana and Pax Americana now and past. All right. He got in there. Rouhani got in there, and he said, he said that he was going to negotiate, and with the permission of the supreme leader, he negotiated with the United States, and he worked out the nuclear deal, and he promised basically the nuclear deal was going to result in, in making Iran's economy better, and it didn't. The USA imposed more sanctions. Then Obama left office. Then Trump got in and ripped up the Iran deal, and then he killed Qasem Soleimani, who's one of the most popular people in the country, and Rouhani looks like a fool right now. Right? He promised everybody he was going to be Mr. Nice Guy. He was going to come in and negotiate with the United States. And then the United States said, ha, we tricked you into negotiating with us, and ripped up the nuclear deal. Right? Now, the Biden people say, well, that was Trump. We're not like that. But, the United States is the United States. And, Rouhani looks like a fool right now. Right? And Ahmadinejad, his camp, the hardliner camp in Iran, have been saying, we told you all along the United States couldn't be trusted. We told you all along not to give up the nuclear program. We told you not to do this negotiation. We told you not to do this. And look what happened. You didn't listen. So the hardliners are going, we told you so. The hardliners are going to surge in Iran. And it's going to happen. And especially, it's not just because of that, right? It's also due to economic issues, right? That the moderates, the reformists movement in Iran, they are very, very, very free market oriented, whereas the hardliners really emphasize the kind of socialistic, not capitalism but Islam goals of the revolution. And because the economy of Iran has gotten worse, and COVID and all of that, I suspect that the hardliner faction is going to be surging in Iran pretty soon. And at the end of the day, though, right? I mean, the reformist movement and the hardliners, they represent two wings of the same apparatus, right? They represent the Islamic revolutionary government, right? The Guardian Council has to approve you to run for office. So people that don't believe in the Iranian revolution are not allowed to run for office. So at the end of the day, these are two wings of the Iranian bureaucracy, right? There's a wing of the Iranian state that is more hardline, and there's a wing of the Iranian state that is more moderate, right? But at the end of the day, they still represent the same entity, which is the Iranian state. So because of that, at the end of the day, there are differences, right? Rouhani wanted to negotiate. Ahmadinejad was much more suspicious of the United States. But at the end of the day, the message is still the same: anti-Israel, anti-imperialist, right? I mean, it's a matter of emphasis almost. But there were some key differences. Rouhani made the negotiations his thing, and didn't work out too well. But also because of the economy. I suspect it won't just be because of the negotiations. That's going to be a big thing. The killing of Qasem Soleimani, all that's big, but also the economy. The fact that the gap between the rich and poor in Iran has increased, and a lot of things. I suspect the hardliner faction will be back in power in Iran soon. That is my prediction. May not be Ahmadinejad himself, right? He was not permitted by the Guardian Council to run the last time he ran. So it may be that he's not able to run, right? There was some times where it came across like he was kind of disrespecting the supreme leader of Iran, right? Ahmadinejad, he kind of looked in some instances like there were some disagreements, and the supreme leader of Iran, you don't disagree with him, right? He is the head of the Islamic revolution. So, so it may not be Ahmadinejad, but it may be that a hardliner government comes into power in Iran, and that's what Trump wants. I mean, I'm not saying that to put down the hardliners. I'm saying that because it's a fact. Trump does not care about overthrowing the Iranian government. Trump just wants to escalate with Iran. He wants to make lots of money by selling weapons throughout that region. He sees escalating tensions with Iran as beneficial. The Biden wing, they are more about soft power, and they're hoping that Rouhani can be like an Iranian Gorbachev, and they can suck up to the reformist movement and use them to take the Islamic Revolution apart, right? And so there are differences in strategy about how to deal with Iran. Trump wants to escalate and sell lots of weapons, like Reagan. Obama, more like Jimmy Carter, wants to, maneuver and kiss up to one wing of the Iranian government and hope that he can subtly maneuver to convince them to give up the revolution. But at the end of the day, the goal is the same. I mean, they both don't like Iran. They both are imperialists, so they have different strategies. They have different short-term interests. That's basically it. Pax Romana. Well, look, the Roman Empire, right? They claim that they created global peace because of the fact that there was no war because the Romans ruled, right? Caesar Augustus. After the death of Julius Caesar, there was civil war, the end of the Roman Republic. Caesar Augustus, who was a distant relative of Julius Caesar's, Octavian, he became the emperor. Rome was no longer a republic. Rome was an autocracy. They had an emperor, they called him a god king. Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome after the fall of the Republic, is the hero of Mark Zuckerberg. Rome had been a democracy, or not a democracy, it had been a republic, right? It had had a hereditary senate, it had, figures that were elected by the citizenry, but it was never it was a slave society. So, it's not a democracy, but it's the Roman Republic, right? The late Roman Republic fell. You had the end of the Roman Republic. And after the end of the Roman Republic, you had, the emperor came in. And the emperor, first was Caesar Augustus. He started the period called Pax Romana, which was the period where Rome, ruled over Europe and North Africa and the Mediterranean with an iron fist. But, a lot of kings and local, a lot of local despots existed. They just had to pay tribute, right? They had to pay tribute to the empire, right? They had to give slaves and give, tools and give, supplies to the Romans, right? And that's kind of how it worked, right? So Brezhnev versus Stalin, right? And it was, the Romans positioned themselves at the center of the global economy. No one could trade with anyone but them. They were the middleman in all trade, right? You could only trade with them. All roads led to Rome, right? That was how the Roman Empire worked. Brezhnev versus Stalin. Well, I think that the difference between Brezhnev and Stalin is that, that Stalin, right? Stalin had been in the revolution, had been a leader of the Bolshevik Party, and Stalin, Stalin exuded enthusiasm, right? During the Stalin era, there was a huge amount of enthusiasm among the population. During the Stalin era, during the 5-year plans, people were working really, really hard, and Stalin was going around and awarding people, and people wanted to please the leader, and there was this passion, and they were going to defeat the Nazis, and, that there was a whole lot of passion. And that by the 80s, Brezhnev, he was trying to kind of put back together the pieces that Nikita Khrushchev had come in, and Khrushchev had done de-Stalinization, and de-Stalinization had involved, all kinds of things that messed up the Soviet economy, and he had done a lot of things that had not been helpful. So Brezhnev was more the hardliner wing of the Soviet bureaucracy. He came in to try and patch things up and get a little bit closer to how things had been under Stalin. The problem was, though, that the passion and enthusiasm was not there. Dang Bukharinite. All right. The passion and enthusiasm was not there. You watch Brezhnev. Brezhnev did not exude a huge amount of enthusiasm from the population. He was kind of going through the motions, and that in a lot of ways, and this is my critique of really existing socialism, is that after a generation or so, it becomes stale, right? That it requires the population to be very enthusiastic about it, and that Brezhnev kind of represented to a lot of people in the Soviet Union, the decaying old Soviet bureaucracy that was mismanaging things, that was not very exciting, right? And that Brezhnev was Stalin 40 years later, without the enthusiasm and without the passion, and with a lot of cynicism. A lot of cynicism had set in the 70s and 80s in the USSR. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s in the USSR, there's a lot of cynicism, a lot of demoralization, and that's what the USA ultimately used to tear down the Soviet Union. So, Brezhnev, he was the leader of the Soviet bureaucracy, and he was trying to be more like Stalin. Like, he wasn't Khrushchev. He was, trying to be more like Stalin, but it was not, there was not passion, right? And that's, they needed market reforms in the USSR. They needed to adjust their system, but they couldn't bend. As I've said many times, the USSR could not bend, so it broke, and that was the fall. Was Deng Xiaoping a Bukharinite? I mean, in China now, they oppose both Stalin and Trotsky, and they in favor Bukharin. That is the party line in China. There's a lot of publications in China that hail Bukharin as the correct one in that debate. But Deng Xiaoping was in very, very, very different historical circumstances than Bukharin, right? Bukharin was the leader of the right opposition. You had Stalin, who was the centrist, and then you had Trotsky, who was the left opposition, permanent revolution. Well, Bukharin, the Bukharinite tendency, they were the right opposition, right? Not much is written about the right opposition, because it wasn't really, at the end of the day, it was a little bit of a different strategy, but they didn't really have a principled difference with Stalin. It wasn't like there were these deep principles that Bukharin disagreed with Stalin about. Bukharin wanted to permanently continue the new economic policy. So that's probably why people think Deng Xiaoping was a Bukharinite, but it was very different circumstances. You have to remember, Deng Xiaoping did what he did after the Cultural Revolution, after the 100 Flowers campaign, after the Sino-Soviet split. Bukharin was saying, let's continue the new economic policy indefinitely in the 1920s. So very different historical circumstances, but I can see the similarities, right? And that in China, there is a lot of writing in China, a lot of academic Marxism that speaks positively of Bukharin. So maybe that's what the person was getting at. How do we get the working class to read theory? Well, we need people doing what I do on here and presenting Marxist theory in a way that's coherent, right? And presenting it in a way that is interesting to people and is simple, right? If you just hand somebody a Lenin book, I'm sorry, it was years. First time I opened, it was really funny. I remember when I was first getting into communism, when I was a young teenager, I read the encyclopedia entry for Lenin. And it said that one of Lenin's most important pamphlets was called What Is to Be Done? And I thought, what an exciting name, What Is to Be Done? I expected that this was an agitational pamphlet, like, what is to be done? Have a revolution. So I remember I got on the internet and I started reading What Is to Be Done. And I went, what the I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I was like, what? Freedom of criticism, Rinpoche, DeLeo, and Kautsky, and I was like, what the? I could not make heads or tails of it. I was like, what in the world is this? It seemed almost like gibberish. It was years before I could read Lenin. The first book I read by Lenin was Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism. Then I read The State and Revolution. It was years before I could really read Lenin and come to understand it, right? And that you said, how do we get the workers to read theory? Well, I'm not sure going up to workers and handing them what is to be done is a good idea, right? We need, pamphlets like Why Communism by Moishe Olgin. We need pamphlets like, Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. But, a lot of Marxist stuff is written in this polemical style where if you don't know the context in which it was written, right? We need popular literature. That is what we need. We don't, read theory. Reading theory is something that you do with a group of people who have already decided to be socialists, already decided to give their life to this, so they're going to study how to do it, right? They're going to study the mechanics of it. But with people that are new, with the broad masses, the working class, you want a basic introductory literature, right? Because if they don't get a basic introductory message, they're going to learn it from, Jabba the Vosh. And they're gonna get it wrong, Jabba the Vosh is gonna sit there, after the revolution, everything is the same except it's a worker cooperative. You're gonna learn it from Jabba the Vosh, right? And we don't want that, right? So we need to tell workers basic popular Marxist literature. That's what we need, right? We need basic popular Marxism explaining the struggle of the workers to seize the means of production, the popular struggle to control the banks, factories, and industries. That's what we need, right? And reading theory, that's like something for people that have already decided this is what they want to give their life to. With people who are already dedicated, then they read theory, right? I mean, it's like, do car salesmen, well, not car salesmen, that's not a good example. I don't know. Chess players, right? Chess players. Do chess players, do they walk up to random people on the street and hand them complex chess game theory? No, because they wouldn't make heads or tails of it, right? They teach people how to play chess. And then those who like to play chess, who decide they want to become chess players, then they might get together and study chess theory, right? That's how it works. Theory is for people that have already decided to give themselves to it. For the masses, you need introductory literature, right? And that, the way all this works, right? With a revolutionary organization, you're going to have a core of people that are going to give their life to it, and you're going to have a periphery. You're going to have a periphery of people that are just, hey, I like socialism, it's better than capitalism, but, not everybody is going to be a, professional revolutionary, right? And then, we need to figure out how these things work, but we shouldn't assume that everybody is going to be the kind of person that reads Lenin, because it's not the case, right? I mean, not everyone is going to read Lenin, not everyone is going to read Marx, but I do think that socialism is in everyone's interest and that we can get beyond capitalism. So, I think that introductory material and popular agitational literature, and popular introductory materials should be the priority. That's my feeling. But on that note, folks, it's late. My wife is waiting for me at home. I have a long subway ride ahead of me in the cold rain, so I should say goodnight. So let me just conclude the way I always conclude. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Good night, folks.